drugs do, like, things like Clarentines and Sudafeds, is that they quench the T helper 2 cells. They help to calm them down. So that's a good thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't do is help the T helper 1. So when you've got an excess of T helper 2s, as a general rule, there's not enough T helper 1 cells in the background.
Right.
Now, T helper 1 cells are the ones that kill bacteria, viruses, candida, fungus, all sorts of things like that.
Okay.
So once again, that's the sort of thing we're having, have you ever used things with, say, horseradish, garlic, zinc, that sort of supplement? The reason they help people with sinus and hay fever and those types of problems is that they boost the T helper 1 cells.
All right.
And they help to modulate the immune system.
Okay.
So they're helping to boost the white blood cells that actually... So when you've got a sinus infection, for example, there's a particular white blood cell called eosinophils. And eosinophils spray acid in the bloodstream.
Yeah.
So it means that when you've got an infection, these white blood cells are coming along and they're spraying on the infection, trying to sort them out.
Right.
But those eosinophils cause the itch, it causes the burn, it causes the watery eyes, it causes, that sort of those real allergic type of symptoms. So quenching the eosinophils is really quite an important thing because the medications don't necessarily modulate the immune system. They're great at quenching it short term. So once again, the herbs that sort of really help with that, well, like I say, things like those garlic horseradish things that are everywhere, they're great. Cheap, easy, you can't, if that works for you, that's great. But if sometimes the microbiome has been damaged, so the lowest layer of the gut, so it's to do with how well our immune system responds to the world around us.
Oh, okay.
So obviously dust isn't out to get us. It's not one of those horrible things that's going to, grab us and destroy us, but it can destroy people's lives. But I don't have an allergic reaction to dust, whereas the next person might. So why is their immune system hyper-vigilant around things like dust or pollens or different foods? And once again, that's all about the modulation of the immune system. So it's things like probiotics that help to get the microbiome, more balanced in the gut. I was chatting to a client just a few weeks ago, and she had this idea that if we did a parasite and bacterial cleanse, that she'd clean out her gut, and then as long as she didn't feed it again, then she'd be able to keep it clean. And I started listening to her. I'm thinking, so you've got this whole germ theory going on in your gut, and it's not going to work like that. And I've said this before, we're only 10% human. Of the cells in our body, 10% are human, 90% are bacteria. So yes, there's nothing wrong with using your Glen 20s in the toilet and that sort of thing. But when it comes to our body, you have to look after your bugs. And it's using those things like, the natural yogurts and the fermented foods and those types of things that help to increase the broad variety of your gut bugs to keep you healthy. So there's been so much study in the last 5 years. Every time I go to a big seminar, they always talk about, and we're doing study on this gut bug and that gut bug and this. And they're sort of finding things like, for example, if we get kidney stones, people who get kidney stones at some stage in their history have destroyed one of the probiotics, one of the gut bugs, whose job it is to sop up uric acid. So therefore you can't get kidney stones unless you have destroyed that particular gut bug. Now at this stage there's no research to show how to regenerate that again, but it's interesting, they're now finding all these little jobs these gut bugs do in the intestines.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Is sinus hereditary? Can it be hereditary?
I think the T helper 2 excess can definitely be inherited. So, and then it doesn't mean you can't sort it out though.
Yeah.
So for example, one of the things that was looked at in a fairly decent study with people with allergic tendencies, because they looked at people like twins, over many years, and it's always interesting then to go, okay, well, because sometimes they do it, and one twin's in Perth and one twin's in Brisbane, and their whole health history matches, but other times they don't. So twins apparently are fascinating to doctors and researchers. But yes, it would be fun having a twin, I'm sure. But nonetheless, what they ended up finding was, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, a lot of the stuff to do with inherited is 80% environmental. So they believe that, so we might end up having the same diet, for the first 18 years of our life as everyone else in our family. So therefore that might build on all these inherited mutations or things that could come through. So with asthma, for example, you might have the ability to develop it, but you might never get it, or you might be the only one in your family who doesn't if you're the one who happens to do X, Y, Z in your history. But yeah, it's there are some cool studies going on. So it's about, once again, with allergies and things like that, there are actually nasal washes and things you can do that help to...
Oh, yes.
Because sometimes there's this thing called biofilm. This biofilm can actually build up in your sinuses and stay there sort of for your lifetime. And it can hold old things like fungal and bacterial particles. So they're just waiting for you to be run down and exhausted, and then they come out to play.
Okay.
So you burn the candle at both ends for, a few weeks in a row, and out they come.
All right. Well, we'll go to some more music and
Beautiful.
we'll be back shortly.